Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all again. Okay, this morning's class is about the concept of it's never too late, or you always have a second chance. Now, there's a historical precedent for this. The basic historical idea of what we're talking about here is the minor festival of what is called Pesach Sheni, the second Passover. The second Passover. So, what is this all about? What's the second Passover mean? Basically, what happened was as follows. At the time of the Exodus from Egypt, there was a command to observe the Passover, which meant sacrificial lamb and various other rites that are associated with Passover. And there were certain people, the following year, this was done again, but there were certain people who were ritually impure for several reasons are brought. Some of the reasons were, one of the reasons that was brought is that they were carrying the bones of Joseph, who had asked that when they leave Egypt and go to the land of Israel, they take his coffin with them. So there were some people who were carrying it, and that made them ritually impure. The Passover offering has to be brought in a state of purity. Another explanation is that they had to carry out the dead corpses, the dead bodies of the two sons of Aaron who went into the recently inaugurated tabernacle without permission, and they passed away there. Their souls were cleaved to the divine presence, and they were no longer alive in this world. So they carried them out. There's other explanations as well, but suffice it to say that there were some people that were impure, and they came to Moses and they said to him, to Moshe Rabbeinu, they said to him, we are spiritually impure. We cannot do the Passover offering. What can we do? Why should we be any worse off spiritually? Because we were involved in doing things. According to some of the explanations, we were doing the right thing. We were doing what Joseph asked us. We had to bury the two sons of Aaron or whatever. So Moses says to them, wait, let me consult the boss. Let me consult God. And that's what happened. He consulted God, and he told me, yes, to have a second chance. It's called the second Passover. Now, there are major differences between the first and the second Passover, and the second Passover is done a month later on this day today. Today is, in the Hebrew calendar, the 14th day of the second month of the year, the month of Iyar. The 14th day of Iyar is when the second Passover occurs. So then people who were unable to bring the first one could bring the second one. But in the larger picture, that's the historical background. But in the larger picture, the whole idea of it's never all over. It's never all over. There's always a chance to rectify, and there's always a chance to improve, and there's always a chance to essentially to start again, is of critical importance. Not only is it of critical importance in terms of behavior, but it's also of critical importance in terms of psychology. That a person knows that even though I screwed up, I haven't screwed up totally. I still have a chance to rectify. So therefore, when a person is spiritually impure, whatever that may mean in a particular, in other words, he's messed up. He's done something that has caused himself to put himself in a situation which is adverse, to say the least, an adverse situation, a negative situation. Or he's too far away. This is the law, actually, of the second Passover. If a person is Tameh, if he was Tameh, spiritually impure, or he was too far away at the time of the first Passover, he was too far away from Jerusalem because it had to be brought in Jerusalem, in Yerushalayim, or even if he willingly, for whatever reason, didn't want to go. He wasn't feeling well, he was too tired, he had a business deal, who knows. But he was too far away, or he was impure, or he didn't want to go. He has a chance to rectify in the second time around. So that's, again, the idea that it doesn't matter what causes what's the cause of missing the first time around? We don't have to go into the causes, whether the causes are psychological or the causes are just practical things, or whether somebody forced us into a situation that was a negative situation, or we followed the wrong, or it was just a mistaken idea, we followed the wrong people. Doesn't matter. That's not the issue. The issue is only looking forward and not looking backwards. We missed the first time around, we have a second opportunity. However, if we just think of it as a second opportunity, that is to a certain extent, from a Kabbalistic point of view, an incorrect way of viewing it. When I say Kabbalistic, it's actually Kabbalistic Hasidic. The Hasidism is one branch of development of Kabbalah. There's several branches of development of Kabbalah over the years, over the centuries. And the latest form of development of Kabbalah is really in Hasidic teachings. I gave a class on this once before, quite a long time ago. Maybe I should go over it again sometime. But this is sort of the third stage of development of Kabbalistic teachings, called Hasidism, founded by the Baal Shem Tov, the master of the good name, and continued to this day through disciples and disciples of disciples, etc. Now, the idea that Hasidic texts explain is that it's not only that we're given a second chance, the second time around we can accomplish more than the first time. And even if one did accomplish the first time, you did it the first time and you did the way it was supposed to be done the first time, go for it a second time in a higher way as well, in a more powerful way. Now, let me explain this in terms of the 2 months in which these two festivals occur. The first festival, or the first Passover, which occurred in the month of Nisan, it's called the month of Nisan. So the first Passover, the whole idea there was to flee from Egypt. They had to flee in a tremendous hurry from the land of Egypt. The Israelites in the land of Egypt, they were enslaved for 210 years, and they had to get out, and they had to get out fast. Why did they have to get out so fast? Because the evil was so overpowering in Egypt that had they remained a moment longer, they would have been overcome by the evil, and there would have been no way out again. The way the sages explain this is that they reached the 49th gate of impurity. There are 50 gates of impurity, just as there are 50 gates of understanding, or 50 gates of Geula, of redemption. There are 50 gates of redemption. I'll speak about that in a minute. So too, there are 50 gates of impurity. Once one has reached the 49th level, that's the last chance to escape. In the 50th level already, there's no chance to escape. The evil has overcome one completely. It so permeates a person that that it would have been impossible at that point in time to escape. Now, how does that fit for a moment? Let's think about how that fits with what we said. There's always a second chance. That was before the Torah was given. That 50th gate was not purifiable before the Torah was given. Excuse me a minute. Let's switch that off. Okay, so the 50th gate, had they entered that, they would not have been able to leave Egypt. They would have just become just like the rest of the Egyptians, permeated with evil. Okay, so when they had to leave Egypt, they left in a tremendous rush, and the purpose of the rush was to escape the clutches of evil as fast as they possibly could. The second Passover, they were already out of Egypt. They were traveling through the desert towards the land of Israel. And here, the idea was not to run away from the evil, but to move towards the good. To move towards the good. There are two types of approaches to changing ourselves that these two ideas represent. One is called, I'm going to use the Aramaic terms and I'll translate them. One is called itkafia. Itkafia means self-subjugation, self-control. The other one is called ithapcha, which means self-transformation. The first post-Passover represents the idea of running away from evil, which is itkafia, self-subjugation, not to be drawn in towards the core of evil, but to run away from it as fast as possible. The second Passover represents a completely different idea, which is the idea of transformation, running towards the good. Self-transformation is a much higher type of working on oneself than simply subduing oneself and preventing oneself from doing the wrong thing. Let's just think about it in terms of the way a person works. If he's constantly in a state of worrying, let's take someone like an ex-alcoholic. If he's constantly, and this is actually taught by Alcoholics Anonymous and all the various drug cure paths, people who are addicted, all the various types of anti-addiction teachings basically tell the person that if you get involved with alcohol again, or if you get involved with drugs again, or whatever it may happen to be, it's tickets, it's over, it's finished. Stay away from it as far as you possibly can. And that is correct. It is a correct attitude, it's a correct way to go about it. However, so that would be what we call itkafia, self-subjugation, to subdue yourself and subjugate yourself so that the inclination towards negative self-destructive behavior is not given space. We don't give space to self-destructive behavior. However, there's a very big difference between that and behavior which not only is not self-destructive, but is building up of the self. Again, called in the Aramaic, ithapcha, transformation. Self-transformation, transforming oneself into something else, is a whole different category of being. It doesn't mean to say that, therefore, you can go back to the alcohol or to the drugs or to the sex or whatever it was that was the addiction and keep it and transform it, but that you become a different person. Leave the alcohol, don't touch it again, because it's got tremendous power, alcohol, drugs, whatever it happens to be. But the ithapcha aspect of things, the transformational thing, the transformational aspect of things is much, much more powerful than simply self-subjugation. Now, let me go even a step further. In terms of Kabbalistic terminology, as everybody knows, the Kabbalistic tree, the tree of the Sfirot, in the tree of the Sfirot, so the lowest of the Sfirot of the divine emanations, which are called the Sfirot, the lowest Sfirah is called Malchut, and the one above it is called Yesod. The lowest one again is Malchut, or as it's usually translated in English, kingdom. And the one above that is called Yesod, foundation. So it's explained in Kabbalah that these two types of work, these two types of self-control or self-transformation really come from these two Sfirot. The Sfirah of Malchut is associated with self-subjugation, self-control, and the Sfirah of Yesod is associated with self-transcendence. Self-transcendence. Two different approaches. An interesting thing about the aspect of Malchut is that it is called self-nullification, or the nullification of one's will to a higher will, or what is called in the terminology bittul hayesh, the nullification of my own existence to a higher cause. Whereas when we're talking about the higher level Yesod, that is called complete nullification of my entire existence. It's not just my will that is subdued to the will of, to the divine will, but my entire existence is obliterated in the divine presence. Called in technical terminology, bitul hayesh and bitul b'metzias. Bitul hayesh, the nullification of self, the nullification of ego. Bitul b'metzias means the non-existence of myself as a separate entity. Now you can see this. There's a sort of a graphic image that people use to understand sort of what the difference is. In bitul hayesh, the nullification of my own personal being, my own personal existence, I still remain here, but realize that things are coming from above, would be like a flag. If you're looking at a flag blowing in the wind, and what your comment would be, the flag is blowing in the wind, right? You see the flag flapping in the wind. Bitul b'metzius, when my existence, my entire existence is completely nullified, would be called the wind is blowing the flag. In other words, the flag is it's not sort of a separate entity. It's a sign of the wind blowing. It's not that the flag is a flag which is being blown by the wind as we see it in the first instance, but rather that it's the wind blowing the flag. We're looking at the wind, not the flag so much. The flag is only a sign for the for the blowing of the wind. So that, again, is the first Passover and the second Passover. The first Passover is simply running away from evil, preserving my existence, and following the rules and the commands which I have to do. But it's not complete nullification of existence in the sense that we just become simply an expression of the divine presence. We could also say it in a slightly different way, that the dominant aspect of the first Passover, the dominant aspect of it is actually fear of evil. The dominant aspect of the second Passover is bonding to, and so to speak, falling in love with God, the divine presence. Two different things. Running away from evil and bonding to the divine presence are two very, very different qualities and two very different actions. Now, in our own lives, when we come across an issue which is bothering us for one reason or another, there are two approaches. These two approaches also come into focus. The one way of dealing with a problem is sort of to chip away at the edges, to attempt to avoid the evil and sort of get rid of it by not engaging, by being unavailable for that particular thing. I'll give you an example. Let's say there's somebody who has a group of friends who are getting into the wrong things, and being part of the group of friends, let's say drugs, for example. So let's say this group of people are, recreational drugs. They're involved with drugs, whatever it may happen to be, and one of them, the person in question, has a bad experience of one sort or another, where it's a bad trip or whatever it may happen to be. It doesn't matter. It's not the issue. But he decides, or she decides, I've got to get rid of it from now on. I have to make sure that I'm not going to get involved in such a thing anymore. I have to spare myself from that. So what does one do then? You don't have to do with those friends. You stay away, and so on and so forth. But staying away from those friends kind of leaves a vacuum. It leaves a social vacuum, so that the person is, to a certain extent, misses having friends, companionship, camaraderie, and so on and so forth. It's difficult. It's going to cause tremendous difficulties to the person not to fall back into that manner and mode of behavior. Therefore, what's the preferable solution. Besides staying away from those particular friends, one should also start to cultivate other friends. Start to cultivate other friends. Now, when we say cultivate other friends, what do we mean by cultivating other friends? Finding people who are the ideal of what I would like to be in my own life, at least at this stage in life, and starting to blend with them, to mold with them. Now that's a simple and practical example of such things. However, just let me see something. 1 second here. I'm sorry, I just have an issue here. All right, there we go. Sorry, there was just another video coming through, another video stream that I had to, sorry, I had to block there. Not that I mind seeing anybody, but just, okay, it's just, yeah, okay. So, to get back to the idea, instead of doing what is called in Kabbalah, the avodat habirurim, trying to pick up the sparks and to restore what has been broken, which is a very valid way of going about things, it's not, however, it's not enough. What has to be done further is that besides picking up the sparks out of previous experiences, in other words, when I had previous experiences, there's nothing that was all bad. There were always some aspects of things that sparks of light, so to speak, in previous experiences that even though the whole experience was overall negative, there's some sparks that I can sort of draw out of there, that I can save, that I can use, that I can bring to the fore. However, that's not good enough, because sometimes with those sparks comes all kinds of other attachments and memories and experiences that could simply drag a person back into the previous state of being. What's a more preferable way of going about it? The more preferable way of going about it is not simply staying away from the evil aspects in which the sparks were encumbered, but rather in focusing on what my ultimate goal is, where I should be moving towards. Looking towards that and then working backwards to where I am now, what should my next step be in order to get to the 50th gate of purity? I said before that there were 49 gates of impurity, and the 50th one is sort of beyond repair. There's also 50 gates of purity, or 50 gates, they call the Nun Sha'arei Bina, the 50 gates of understanding. Corresponding to actually the 49 days, or rather the 50 days between the first Passover and the holiday, which is called Shavuot, the time of the giving of the Torah, which was 50 days after we left Egypt on the 50th day. We only count 40 now, so there's a practice of counting every day from the time of the Exodus from Egypt, the day after, 50 days until Shavuot, until the time of the giving of the Torah. So those 49 days that we count are called the 49 days of the counting of the Omer, the days of the counting of the Omer. So those 50 days we count, we actually only count 49, and the 50th comes by itself. We are able to get to 49 gates of worth through 49 gates of understanding. The 50th is a given. The same thing is told about Moses, that all through his life, he was pulling aside veil after veil. That's the way Maimonides explains it, the Rambam. He pulled aside veil after veil until he reached the place where there was no veils left anymore. And then there was a divine revelation when he went up onto the mountain that was called Har Navo, or in Hebrew it's called Har Navo. And the Kabbalists explain it as Har Shenun Bo, the mountain on which the 50th gate was found. The 50th gate is the giving of the Torah. That was the complete revelation to Moses of the divine presence. The complete revelation of the divine presence to Moses. So the two approaches, therefore, are trying to salvage what was there before, but running away from the evil that was encumbered with it. The other approach is moving towards the good, seeing what the future could hold, and working my way back to where I am now, and therefore what my next step ought to be. So the idea, therefore, of the second Passover, which is today, is a concept of not just self-subjugation, but self-transformation. A person can essentially become a different person on using the power of what this particular day means. And that is psychologically gives us the understanding that not only is it never too late, but that every day, even in the middle of a crisis, there is tremendous opportunity, and the power of the crisis gives us the impetus and the will, the tremendously strong will and desire to transform that into opportunity. That the crisis can be transformed into opportunity on a much deeper level. In terms of Kabbalistic terminology, there was what was called the world of Tohu, the world in which the vessels shattered. This is spoken about right at the beginning of Genesis, right at the beginning of Bereshit, the book of Bereshit. Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created heavens and earth. V'haaretz ha'ata tohu v'avohu v'choshech al pnei ha'tohom. There was darkness and void, and there was darkness over the deep, etc. V'ruach Elokim merachefet al pnei hamayim. The Spirit of God hovered over the waters; it wasn't settled. The spirit of godliness was not in a settled place; it wasn't revealed, and so on and so forth. It was hovering, so to speak. Vayom Elokim yehi or. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Vayhi or. Vayom Elokim yehi or. Vayhi or. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. So the Kabbalists explain that the first modality, which was the modality of darkness and the hovering of the spirit of divinity, where it was not settled, it wasn't contained in any way in the world, it was hovering above, so to speak. That is the method of, that is the running away from evil aspect. That's the idea of the world of Tohu, the world that we have to avoid, that world of chaos, that world of darkness and so on, from which we all would naturally want to flee. But the world of tikkun, the world of rectification, the world of yehi or, let there shall be light, that concept of there shall be light, there will be light, and there was light, that is the second type of work. It's working in the light rather than working with the darkness. Many of you may have had experiences as psychologists, social workers, whatever it may happen to be, of dealing with people who are in, let's say, in a very dangerous emotional place. How do we deal with such things? One way of dealing with it is to deal directly with the emotions and what caused the emotional bust. That's one way of dealing with it, and that in a lot of cases does work. How well it works is another question, because it makes a person very often dependent on the person administering, in other words, on the psychologist or on the social worker or the psychiatrist or whatever, or on the drugs that the person takes to get over that depression or that darkness. But the second way of dealing with it is teaching the person to be able to look at the light, to look towards the light, to turn around and look at the solution rather than the problem, at the light rather than the darkness. Instead of working in the darkness and trying to reduce the darkness one way or another, or take the person out of the darkness, chase the darkness away until he's left somewhat normal, it would be much more powerful for us to work with a goal, maybe even a huge goal, a very what would seem now an unattainable goal, but one that is at least clear. It might be unattainable at this point in time the way we see it now, but at least it's clear what it is. The more clarity one can have in what it is that one wants to reach. In other words, what it is that one wants to reach shouldn't be just a theoretical thing. One has to make it concrete. How do you make it concrete? By finding a person who you would wish to be like. Now, it doesn't mean to say that you're going to copy him or her in every possible way, but you're going to learn from them how they deal with their issues. Everyone has issues. How do they deal with the issues? A person that deals with the issues in a positive way, someone that I see that is able to overcome negative or adverse situations in a way that is in a way of light, that kind of person I want to try and emulate. I want to learn from him how to do it for myself. Not exactly copy. Maybe it'll work that way at the beginning. You copy what that person does, you emulate them that. But what one wants to emulate is essentially the method of dealing rather than the actual actions or attitudes. But in general, the concept of how to deal with adversity in a way of light rather than in a way of darkness. Now, the second way of dealing with things is, as we said before, it's transformative, which means that the same challenges that the person had before, one has now transcended. Those challenges are no longer challenges in the same way. A person is in a different place, is in a sense a different person. This also works with a concept, a well-known concept in Kabbalah, which is called Gilgul. Gilgul meaning incarnation. Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, the Arizal, has two works, the two very famous books called Shar HaGilgulim and Sefer HaGilgulim, the Gate of Reincarnation and the Book of Reincarnation, where he discusses the whole concept of reincarnation, which is a Kabbalistic concept, and what it means. The way it's looked at in from other philosophies and Buddhism and various others, is that a person is reincarnated endlessly, forever and ever, basically, and it's always kind of a punishment of one sort or another until one manages to transcend the cycle of whatever, the cycle of life. In Kabbalah, it's not looked at like that. It's looked at as an incarnation is an opportunity. If a person is reincarnated, and the Arizal says that almost all of us in these generations, and he was talking about in his time, which was in the 1500s, almost all of us are reincarnated souls. In our times, in the 21st century, you can be sure that all of us, almost without exception, are reincarnated souls. And we're here to fix up things that were previously an issue. We're given an opportunity to fix things, to rectify that which we didn't manage to do in a past existence. But the way of rectifying I'm suggesting over here is not simply to avoid getting entangled with evil, with negative, with darkness, but rather to transform our lives into what we would imagine the ideal to be, what we have pictured as our ideal, to move towards that. We might not achieve it 100%, but we're working in the light and we're working on increasing the light. And that really is this time and this particular day of the calendar, called again Pesach Sheni, the Second Passover. That's what it really means. It's a time for self-transformation, jumping from the state of focusing on darkness and chasing away the darkness to the idea of focusing on the light and jumping towards it. Okay. There are some questions I see. Let me just address a couple of these questions.